Welcome to the Right to Reason podcast. I'm your host, Robert Stanley. Today, we were supposed to be asking Dan Arrow how to raise our children without God, but because of scheduling complications, we are asking a different question. Do you have a body, or are you a body? We are discussing dualism.
It's the Right to Reason podcast.
There is a problem in terms of the relationship of body and mind, which says that essentially we are physical beings in one sense, but we are also mental beings in another sense.
Christian theologians differ over whether it's body and soul or body, soul, and spirit. So right there's a little bit of ambiguity. Some will say it's two, others will say it's three. Let's just say there's at least a duality, right? We're material beings, but we're also immaterial beings. And my question would be back to the atheist. How do you explain the idea that there are immaterial realities about us? Like consciousness. Where does consciousness come from? Like the reason, our ability to reason. The laws of logic, the laws of mathematics, the laws of morality. You know, it's wrong to torture babies for fun. Where do these laws come from?
Everything about your mind can be damaged by damaging the brain. You can cease to recognize faces, you can cease to know the names of animals, but you still know the names of tools. I mean, the fragmentation in the way in which our mind is parcellated at the level of the brain is not at all intuitive, and there's a lot known about it. And what we're being asked to consider is that you damage one part of the brain, and the mind, something about the mind and subjectivity is lost. You damage another, and yet more is lost. And yet if you damage the whole thing at death, we can rise off the brain with all our faculties intact, recognizing grandma and speaking English. Now,
this episode of the Right to Reason podcast is brought to you by our patrons and contributors like me. We have all recognized the value of the unrestrained marketplace of ideas and have decided to make a difference. You can make a difference too. Contribute at patreon.com/right and learn more about your right to reason at therighttoreason.com. Your activism is appreciated.
And today we're talking to Traylortyler. He's working on his master's in hermeneutics and is on staff at St. Patrick Presbyterian Church, and is also wanting you to check out Aspen Grove Church Planting Network. And how do they find that?
You can find that at agcpn.com.
All right. And that church and that network are also going to be included in today's show notes. So happy to be talking to you, man.
Yeah, it's good to talk to you too.
All right. So you are a Christian. You're here to defend your faith, as it were, and just have a good conversation with a crazy satanic atheist nut job. But what I often, and you're friends with, his name
Justin Graves.
Yeah, Justin Caleb Graves. He's been on the show lots of times. Listeners really have a lot of respect for him, actually.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and this is primarily atheist listeners. We've had some believers. We even have a Christian patron. But what they find with your buddy is that he's a pretty reasonable guy, and he's not one of those disrespectful Christians. He's not one of those aggressive Christians. You know, there is that out there. I wanted to play you a clip of Paula White, Donald Trump's spiritual advisor.
Yep.
You're already prepped for it.
Yeah. Let's dive in.
Here it is.
He's not a polished politician. In other words, he's authentically, whether people like it or not, has been raised up by God, because God says that he raises up and places all people in places of authority. It is God that raises up a king. It is God that sets one down. And so when you fight against the plan of God, you're fighting against the hand of God. We were not sent into this earth to fit in or just to, we weren't just sit here to be a part. We were sent here to take over.
Are you listening?
I'm trying.
That's the church.
Oh.
That's why we have the president we have. He doesn't fit.
Amen.
He's not a normal president.
Amen.
And here's a woman who is from the bottomlands.
Yes.
But God has raised her up to the White House.
Yeah.
Paula White, who's gone through the valley of the shadow of death time and time again.
Yes.
She now can walk into the White House anytime she wants to. She has full access to, in the Bible days, the king, the president.
Yeah.
Why? Because God used her and broke her.
Yes.
I want you to read her book.
Okay, so you just heard she's got access to the president. I feel like this is dominionism, man. This is Christians trying to get power. The largest demographic that voted for President Trump was white evangelicals.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems crazy to me, man. Like, did you vote for Trump yourself?
No, I didn't.
Did you vote Hillary? Or did you just...
Yeah, I did.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're a little bit more of a liberal Christian then.
You know, it's tough for me. That those labels, liberal and conservative, are hard.
Mm-hmm.
What I would say, I'm not a capitalist Christian. I also don't know that I could identify as a Marxist Christian either. Frankly, it kind of comes down to my understanding of the role of the church. I have a pretty high view of the role of the church, to the extent that it would be separate from things like, American government.
Marxist Christian would be an oxymoron almost, right? But
but I mean, there's a whole group. I mean, liberation theology, I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
No.
Their whole fundamental thrust almost is to bring in some of this Marxist tradition and apply it to the faith.
How do you feel about someone like Donald Trump or Paula White or Mike Pence, where a lot of non-believers, we look at that and say, oh, that's what Christianity is?
The unfortunate reality is that it is the American expression of Christianity. Christianity, and really ideology as a whole, is always culturally contingent. And we live in a culture that has fully bought into late capitalism, fully bought into some of these modernist meta-narratives of progress and of claiming land. And so, of course, Christianity is going to reflect that in America today. And I think it's really unfortunate. But the reality is that I can't identify with that.
Right.
I hope to take a more, historic, late Catholic, late medieval sort of approach to the faith. I'm a Presbyterian, which essentially comes out of early Reformation. So late Catholic, early Reformation kind of framework. So hopefully, I can embody that rather than the values of America.
I find a useful exercise whenever I have a Christian on is to just ask them where they stand on certain current events or clickbait topics, as it were, but important issues as well. And that kind of gives the listener an idea of who we're talking to. So whenever you say, I voted Hillary, and I noticed you didn't say it with a lot of pride, but you had to. I get it. I actually voted Jill Stein, so I'm one of those.
Okay.
Ooh.
Okay.
Where would you stand on gay marriage? Pro, con, rapid fire.
Rapid fire,
which I know isn't really fair, but
if the state wants to legalize gay marriage, the state can legalize gay marriage.
Do you think it's wrong to be gay? Do you think it's bad?
I don't think it's wrong to be gay. I'll be honest, my view of doctrine comes probably at an expense. It comes from the church in a lot of ways, the church and the text. When I sit down to read the text, I have a really hard time saying same-sex couples cannot be married. But my cultural context, my church leaders, the people I look up to in my life do really hold that view. And as a result, I think it's important for the church to trust in elders, trust in tradition. And so I don't think I could boldface say that I would affirm or I would, serve at a same-sex marriage. I don't think I could officiate one.
Well, yeah, I don't think you should be required to either.
Yeah.
They've required ChristianMingle.com to have a gay option, even though ChristianMingle.com is, it was against same-sex marriage and homosexuality.
Totally.
I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's the free market that I would be inclined to. But also, I do think that, gays should have the right to be married, and I think that there's nothing wrong with being gay. I don't think there's anything unethical with it myself. I got a buddy named Eric, and I was working at this factory, and a lot of these guys were all picking on him. They were like, oh, he's a faggot, or just cracking jokes on me or whatever one time. And I have no idea. I don't know what I did to provoke it. But anyway, they were giving me a hard time. I was a young guy, and he comes out, he's like, leave him alone. And he stuck up for me, and he says, Robert sucked a lot of dick, and he hated it every damn time. That was his defense, and then everyone kept laughing afterwards. Where the hell did that come from? But so, all right, where do you stand on abortion? You like killing babies?
Oh gosh. I struggle with abortion. I would say I can't affirm it, not because the Bible says so, but because I actually think there's a philosophical argument against it. I think at the end of the day, it's like we have to ask the question of what is the human being. And I'm tentative to say that a fetus is not a human.
How about wars in Afghanistan or bombing Syria or invading Iraq? Like, where do you stand with our international relation, military-industrial complex, stuff like that?
I think ultimately that's a very nuanced conversation, and so.
Well, let's simplify it to say, do you think we've been in Afghanistan too long?
I do.
Okay,
I do think we've been in Afghanistan too long.
We could find some agreement there. So you're okay with gay marriage. You don't like abortion from a philosophical place, but not necessarily a religious one. You're not pro military industrial complex, as it were.
Yeah. Let's clarify I just want to be clear, like on gay marriage issue, I'm okay with it from a state perspective. Mm-hmm. But from within my own religious convictions, I can't.
You think like one man and another man having sex is bad?
I don't know. It's an area I really struggle with. I choose to err on the side of church tradition. And church history.
How about trans rights? Do you think if a man identifies as a woman, then they have the right to be?
From a state perspective, yeah, I do.
Okay.
And that's just it. It's like I draw a distinction between the church and state. I don't believe that the state embodies the values of the church, and so I don't think Christians ought to necessarily be enforcing that.
What if it did? Would you be for theocracy, or do you like separation of church and state?
So here's the deal. I actually believe that the state is always theologically minded. I don't think we can ever escape theology, even if we claim to be quote unquote secular.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. I don't mean like there's like a cultural influence. I mean like
no. I mean seriously. Like I think our current church, our current state is pagan. The values of the state come from heterodox theology, which is not Christian. Mm-hmm. So to answer your question, do I believe in theocracy? I think it's always happening. I think we're always bowing down to false gods, false idols. I'm all for a soft theocracy, not so much one where we're getting divine inspiration, but one where we're taking seriously a set of theological beliefs and actually running with them. So yes, I think I would believe in a soft theocracy.
Medicare for all.
State by state.
Okay, so it won't take off.
Yeah.
That's almost like the gun debate where it's like, well, let the states do what they want. Well, in that case, it's not going to work because they'll just go to another state.
It's tough because I really do believe in it. I think our Medicare system can be really improved. The other side of the coin, though, is that I'm just not confident it can be done on a national level effectively. Maybe it can, and maybe I'm wrong on that. But
how about immigration? Do you like the Trump wall, or are you getting?
No, I don't like the Trump wall, but I also don't like open borders. You know,
somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Okay, so I feel like the listener kind of has a pretty good idea about you. As a Christian, are you more or less leaning more like, I believe in God, therefore I'm a Christian? Or are you more one of those, it's all about Jesus for me, man, and that's where I start?
That's a great question.
Well, I get both. That's why I asked, because if I start from one angle and somebody says, it's just the historical evidence for Christ is overwhelming, and from that I became a theist. I find that argument to be a little deceptive. I don't think it's intellectually honest. I think everybody starts from a place of, well, I really feel intrinsically that there's a God out there. This came from something, and I can understand that argument.
Yeah. I would say it's a mixture of a lot of things. I really believe that we are more than just rational beings. I think that we are embodied holistically, enculturated. We're set into so many different systems and realities that, for me, coming to the faith is not so much the evidence aligned and I bought into the Jesus narrative. Mm-hmm. I would say being a Christian is probably a mixture of that I believe in God argument, that sort of it's natural, it's in my bones. It's a mixture of that. It's a mixture of life experience. It's a mixture of trust in essentially placing my faith in something outside of myself, and watching it actually be really beneficial for my life, not just in a practical way, but in like a really healthy spiritual way. Like I think I'm becoming like sanctified, holier because of these truths. So I'd say a lot of reasons why I would identify as a Christian, but not just the evidence aligned. I do think there's good I think there's okay evidence for the resurrection of Jesus.
You're a philosophy guy. Would it be fair to say that you kind of start from dualism itself, where you would say you feel like you are somewhere behind your eyes looking out right now? When you say something, it's coming from a free will of a spiritual origin. Would you say that there is a soul that is operating your meat machine, as it were?
I do think there's a soul. I think there's a material and a spiritual. I think that's deep in the Christian meta-narrative. But I think they overlap a little in the human. Like, I don't think the human is just a strict dualism. I think it's almost like two sides that kind of mesh in the middle and become one in the middle. So I can't so much say, like, I'm a strict spiritualist. This
is where I always get a little confused with not just Christians, but any dualist. I wonder, like, okay, when you die, your body begins to decompose, or you get burnt in a furnace or whatever, worms eat you, what have you, right? And then you yourself go on. And I'm wondering, like, what is that thing? Because we've already mapped the brain enough to figure out that, like, I can literally poke your brain with a needle and change your personality. I can find the spots that your memories exist. I can locate whether or not you're going to be a funny guy or not a funny guy. They've had split brain surgeries where the left side believed in God and the right side was an atheist. So, like, if this is so neurologically focused, what is this soul? It wouldn't be anything recognizable as Tyler.
Totally. So here's how I would kind of go about navigating that. It's like, that is exactly kind of where I'm getting at. We're not just a soul stuck in this material body. There's something about the material that does overlap. When you poke the brain, the very spirit that fills you is affected. I think those two are intertwined. I have a really hard time just being a strict materialist.
I don't see any other option. I don't like it. I would say I'd be a methodological materialist.
Fair, yeah.
Not a philosophical one. It's not like I'm ideological about it, where I'm like, no, you have to. I heard Richard Dawkins on Joe Rogan's podcast recently, and he was just kind of like picking at Joe, like, what, you think the lights just don't go out when you die? What? He's almost like provoking him in a sense. And it's like, well, okay, I agree with Richard on a lot of stuff, but I don't like the idea of saying, like, this has to be this way, and I'm so committed to it. It's just that this seems where the evidence tends to lead.
So that's an important line that you just said. It's where the evidence leads. And I really believe that when we pick up an empiricist, or maybe I'm speaking up for you, but it seems almost like an empirical sort of method. When we pick up the empirical method, of course the results are going to be materialist, right?
What else do you have available to you to interpret reality?
This is a lot of what my degree is. It's an interpretation track that I'm on. And I love it because it offers alternatives. For one, phenomenology is a really valuable tool belt to take up. It sort of steps outside of the strict materialist framework, and it says that we are perceiving things and we are always gathering up data. And maybe we don't actually have direct access to the objective world. I do believe that we do. What phenomenology allows you to do is prioritize the spirit that's within you that perceives things and engages not with first the object, but with your perception of it. And your perception of it is always altered and engaged by the culture that you're in, by your own life experiences, by the material reality that you are in. It basically allows more freedom. It allows a broader scope of how to interpret reality that's not just material-based evidence. Does that make sense?
No. I get what you're saying. I think I understand you. If there is something non-material, and I don't mean like love or intelligence, I mean like if there's something...
Well, why not love and intelligence, though?
Well, that's a different topic, because that's something that we can say is a result of the brain, of dopamine and serotonin, right? Or a result of acquiring knowledge, as it were. Where I'm struggling with what you're saying is I'm looking at either natural or supernatural. And whenever you're saying we need to have some facet of understanding reality that incorporates the supernatural, I'm asking, how would you ever identify this? Like, it would have to enter into the natural, and immediately it would cease to be. It would almost be like whenever somebody says, well, I have alternative medicine. Well, let's test that out. And the FDA is going to look at it, and they're pretty darn strict. I work in pharmaceuticals. They're insane. Like, there will literally be, at my job, there will be 3 people doing a job creating a cancer medicine, and two of them are doing the job, and one of them is literally standing behind them with a clipboard recording everything they do. It's outrageous, man. That's how strict it is. But once that medicine is proven to work, oh my God, they can't wait to flood the market with it, which is why I always laugh at people that say, like, oh, they've got the cure for cancer. They're just saying, are you kidding me? In this economy, you don't think somebody would love to sell that? But either way, once something becomes proven, it's no longer alternative medicine. It's just medicine. And once something is proven scientifically, empirically, it's no longer supernatural. It's just natural.
I agree that once we prove things with the empirical method, then that method will result in things that say, yeah, this is a material reality that operates in the world. The question is, why do you feel an undying allegiance to the empirical method? And we can say because it works, and I think it does. I think it does work in the material world. But what I noticed in what you said is that love is a result of the material. You're saying that in order for things to be real, we have to test them in the material world. You are implicitly privileging matter.
Yes.
And if you want to do that, that's okay. But I think it's important to recognize and say, I am presupposing materialism. Therefore, I'm going to use the empirical method on things.
To be more specific on love, which is why I started by saying I don't want to talk about it, but just because it's a conceptual thing. So it would be the same as me saying God is a result of matter. Well, God's a concept as far as I'm concerned. And you would also agree that he's a concept, but you'd probably say he's a concept and an individual, a thinking agent, as it were. But it wouldn't really make a lot of sense for me to say God is a result of matter. It kind of could, but in the same way, like, I don't want to say love is a result of matter. Love is the phenomenon that exists, and we define it as love. So I don't want to get dragged into, like, do numbers exist or, like or any kind of like postmodernist stuff, although it's a lot of fun. I love the topic. I don't know that it would be applicable to just simple conversation on dualism.
Well, so where I'm getting at and why I'm going all through this is because phenomenology is an alternative from dualism that incorporates both the material and the spiritual. You begin with the phenomena. You begin with the experience of love. You begin with the experience of anger. You begin with these real experiences that are true and exist within us. And we begin by studying them and by exploring them and how we perceive reality. It's an alternative. I'm not saying I buy into it wholesale, but I'm offering an alternative to, empiricist methodology for interpreting reality.
We both agree these are emotions. If you have a larger amygdala, then you're going to respond to fear-based motivations stronger than someone that has a smaller amygdala. I mean,
but they're nonetheless real. They are real.
I'm not saying the experience isn't real. I'm just saying the explanation is matter.
What it comes down to, I think the fundamental difference here is a presuppositional one. It is one that says, what comes first? A material worldview that then will study things through the empiricist lens to get to a material answer, or a dualistic one that says the spirit and matter play a role together and they're both sort of playing off each other and we can interpret things through that framework, or an entirely spiritual one that gives some, transcendent answer to what's going on. It's all, divine light speaking through us or whatever. And I tend to be in the middle. I tend to presuppose that the material and the spiritual both play a fundamental role. And so when we interpret these things like love and like prayer, what the hell is prayer? When we interpret these things, we can't just go straight to the matter. We have to go to what is the real, authentic experience that the human is having? How does that engage with the material world, and how does that engage with the spirit?
Tyler, what reason would we have to believe that there is a spirit intermixed with matter?
I would say human experience. We can't prove it based on material alone. I really don't believe that.
Why?
Because you can't prove the supernatural, the spiritual, based on the natural and the material. I just don't that's why I think the arguments for the resurrection of Jesus are weak. You can't prove that Christ was raised from the dead by giving a bunch of material evidence. Those two aren't meant to coincide like that.
Hold on, you're breaking my brain here. It almost sounds like you're saying, well, you're accusing me of presupposing natural, that
I think so.
You're presupposing supernatural.
I'm presupposing that the human is a mixture of spirit and matter.
Why would you presuppose anything?
Well, why do you presuppose? This is the thing.
I'm not presupposing. Like I said, I'm methodological about it. So I'm saying this is the only thing that I know that I can test. If there's a way to test supernatural, please let me know. I would be more than happy for you and I to
This
both
is exactly
pray
what I'm saying.
to
You
two
can't
different
test
gods.
the supernatural with material evidence.
Well, how can we determine it exists?
So this is the crux of where we're getting at. I believe that humans are always presupposing things. I really do.
Fair, but that would be a flaw in our nature, right? Same as we have a hyperactive sense of agency detection. I hear a loud noise outside. I assume someone made that noise. I'm in the cave and the tree blows from the wind and it makes a creaky sound. I'm like, that's a wildcat. Run, and that's kept us safe. So that's why we have it through evolution. You believe in evolution, right?
I think so.
Odd answer. Okay, cool. But either way, like there's certain flaws that we have in our logic. And one of them is if something isn't intuitive, we have an unrealistic amount of skepticism toward it. And that really doesn't work whenever we're talking about black holes. Sure. Or if we're talking about, the Big Bang or how big the universe is. Like there's lots of stuff. And in the same way, I feel like believing in dualism, even believing that the self exists, believing in free will, believing in God, all of these things are very intuitive because that's just what helped us have sex before we got killed. But that's not necessarily, there's no reason rationally to believe in the supernatural, and any presupposition is irrational in itself.
But would you say that presuppositions need to be almost cast off so that we can get to like some sort of objective core of rational truth?
Can you say that again? So
the Enlightenment, I'm shifting a little bit. I'm going to come back. When you read Kant and you read his question, what is the Enlightenment? He wrote this paper on it. Kant is basically saying the Enlightenment is a shedding off of prejudice. There's this hegemony of the Catholic Church, and we're shedding it off, and we're getting down to the objective, reasonable core. And you see that trend all throughout the Enlightenment. And what you see in the late 20th century is this postmodern turn that says, well, what if prejudice and presupposition actually are necessary elements to having dialogue in the first place? Language itself is bathed in cultural presupposition, and we need it.
I'm very fond of Deleuze, but
my postmodern stream is early postmodern. It's Heideggerian. It's Hans Georg Gadamer, and what they're really getting at in these early postmodern texts are basically asking the question: is prejudice something to be cast off, like Immanuel Kant said, or is it necessary for the functioning of the human?
Sure.
Do we need to presuppose things? And so when it comes to what I perceive you're doing, I perceive you are presupposing the priority of the material world.
Hold on, Tyler. Hold on. Weren't the postmodernists saying this to argue that we should doubt that which we know? We should doubt truth itself, as it were. I mean, so whenever our whole communication is based on binary thinking, for example.
That's Derrida, for sure.
Sure. And that was proving that there's flaws even in the way that we understand what we're saying to each other, the scientific method itself. But I feel like you're taking this and using it to argue for presupposition.
So Gadamer and Heidegger are early postmoderns who are not arguing for the destruction of truth. They're arguing for an alternative understanding of truth. Once you get into a later 1970s French philosophy with Derrida and Deleuze and Baudrillard, you get to this framework that says we're going to deconstruct this hierarchy of truth.
Okay, so you don't like that stuff.
I don't think I do.
Okay.
I don't think I do. I do like what Gadamer says. Gadamer actually, I mean, you could ask so many, I talk about him nonstop because I think he's brilliant. He basically argued that when we interpret text, we can't do so with this scientific historicalist method. We have to do so in community, in a history, and with prejudice. And hopefully we're coming to a broader understanding of the text. And this is where I'm getting at with life. It's like I have a hard time casting off prejudice, trying to get to the objective material core of reality, because I think that prejudice is a natural phenomenon, and it's something that's baked into us as human beings, and it's actually a good thing. That said, I think there are right and wrong prejudices. I think there's right and wrong presuppositions. I don't think they're things that need to be cast off, but things that can be helpful. So when it comes to this question about the human, question about what is the human, is it a spirit and matter or just matter? I'm baked in a tradition that says that it is spirit and matter. I see it in my life from a phenomenological standpoint. I live in it, and I think it's beautiful, and it actually makes sense of the world, not in a sort of empiricist, I checked all the material boxes, I did the scientific experiments, and I came to a conclusion, but in a very holistic way of understanding the human life.
Your argument is not pro-postmodernism. Your argument is coming right out of Bayesian game theory. What you're saying to me, and correct me if I'm making a straw man here, but what you're saying to me is your prejudices, your presuppositions have created a scenario that makes it more probabilistic that you'll be accurate. It's not that you're actually finding accuracy through this method, because we all know having a prejudice is by definition limiting the likelihood of accuracy that you have. So it's clearly not that you're supporting this postmodernist perspective. I think that you're just trying to say, yeah, it's led me down this path and I kind of like where I am now. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and I don't agree.
I don't see how you are defending presupposition with this argument. I see how you're defending how we have communication through it,
totally.
How we are able to interpret different concepts through it. Sure, I'm with you 100%. Even when someone says, what, you think the universe came from nothing? And I want to just almost ask them, like, do you even realize that, like, whenever you say nothing, we're both just talking about something conceptual that doesn't exist? There's no way that it can exist. So even for you to refer to it is what Deleuze would describe as a narrative of the concept, because there is no actual place to put that concept. There is no theory of forms that can work here. There is no true table. There is no true nothing. So I'm with you 100% that that's how we speak, but that's not how we identify reality. It's something that we try to avoid to confirm our understanding of that which is.
Have you ever heard of critical realism?
No, it sounds cool.
It is a school that got started late 20th century. Roy Bhaskar is probably the biggest thinker in it. He passed away a couple of years ago. It's a field that scientists have decided to, and I say scientists broadly, I shouldn't say that, but a handful of scientists have chosen to identify with because they really don't like the postmodernism of Thomas Kuhn, who says that it's all just intersubjective language games, it's all meaningless, whatever. But it's also not a hardline realist account, which says that, a sort of empirical account, which says that we have access to the empirical data in the empirical world. Critical realism is this nuanced approach to scientific theory, which says that empiricism matters, but it is one part of a larger spectrum. It is one element to which we identify truth. And at the end of the day, it is almost a lower part to a grand theory of reality that we're creating. Meta theories is what they're called. So I say all that because I think you'd be interested in it, because I think it's actually probably applicable here. But I do want to circle back to this idea of postmodernism. I'm arguing in favor of an early postmodern approach, one of Heidegger and Gadamer. I'm not arguing in favor of a deconstruction. Gadamer's book, his magnum opus, is called Truth and Method. And he's saying that so often in the West, we like to have methods to identify truth. We like to be able to create empirical scientific methods that lead us to the truth. We see that in textual interpretation. We see that in scientific interpretation and social interpretation. But Gadamer argues that truth is not bound to a method. Truth is an embodied, holistic experience which uses the methods, but is not itself bound to the method. When I approach a sandwich and I want to figure out what is the sandwich, and I study it empirically, I can come to a part of the truth. But I have to acknowledge I came to it with presuppositions. If I change those presuppositions, what is the sandwich? Well, it's a cultural artifact that, does X, Y, Z, and it has these roles throughout human history. What is beer? That's a great question. We can analyze it from all these different frameworks using different presuppositions, not claiming to have one master presuppositional framework, but allowing wiggle room, allowing people from different perspectives to input into our understanding of what is. It's not just empirical. It's more than that.
Here's how I would map out this thing, right? Like if we were a crazy conspiracy theorist and we're putting like newspaper clippings on the wall and putting a little red string between each one, you know what I mean? I would say that it started with you and I talking about dualism, and then that led to, well, why should I believe in the supernatural? And then you said, well, you have precepts that lead you to only believe in the natural, and I have precepts that lead me to believe in both. And then I said, well, why should we believe in precepts at all? And then that little red string goes to a newspaper clipping that says, just in, postmodernism. And I feel like and not the postmodernism that I accuse you of, but so fair enough. This is not explaining why you think there's someone behind your eyes looking out right now. Or maybe the way that you would phrase it is someone infused within your eyes, within the matter of your brain. I see no reason to believe it.
Well, okay. You see no reason to believe it. And I'm happy to explain why I do, and I will explain why I do. But I do think it's important to say that what I think is the reason that you don't see a reason for it, the reason it's hard to buy into it, is because we are quick to approach things with a materialist lens.
Fair enough. Okay. Fair enough. I don't want to shift the burden of proof here. Like it, and it's not even proof I'm asking for. It's more opinion.
No, I understand, and I need to be clear on what I actually am arguing for and why I believe it. The reason I believe in the spirit as a participant in the human, it comes from a lot of sources. One, you see it in Scripture. That's an important thing. And I'm not this like Scripture alone kind of guy. But I think Scripture is a really important thing. It's rich in human history. 2,000 years of human development was based on that book, and it's an incredibly valuable book. So you see this webbed throughout Scripture. There's this idea of matter and spirit kind of working together. When I try to live that out in my life, when I try to see myself as not just a material being, but actually someone who has material, but is also a spirit and engages with people on a real spiritual level, I see a human that actually lives an authentic human experience in I know I'm using vague language and I need to be clear on it. When I see a human that sees themselves as both, then they're not just a machine in the capitalist cog. They're not just a worker. They're allowed to be more than just matter. They're allowed to be a participant in a family, someone who loves, someone who thinks and tastes things. The phenomena matter when you're allowed to have a spirit. The phenomena are not just cast off as phony perceptions that aren't real, but they're allowed to be real. And I think that actually gives us a good understanding of how we could live well and how to actually be good, fully developed humans. Now, I understand you're going to, or I think you're probably going to respond to that like, but you can't prove it.
No, actually, my response is that was fucking beautiful, Tyler. However, I think it's hubris, sir. I think it's ego, and it's not ego in the sense of, don't get me wrong here. Take it with a grain of salt. It's not ego like me saying Tyler thinks Tyler is great. No, Tyler really has a deep and passionate love for humanity, for consciousness, for love itself, for the ethos of that which drives us toward altruism and spiritual enlightenment. And I think that's what's beautiful about what you said. But there's no reason to think that's true. We're just primates.
And so that's ultimately, I'm going to come back to a presupposition here. It depends on what presuppositions you take to the text.
No, you have to give a reason to believe in supernatural. You have not done that. We have a reason to believe in natural. You and I are on the same page there. We're not in any disagreement there. If you punch me in the face, I feel it. We both believe in that. You have yet to present a reason to believe in the supernatural. You've only presented...
I don't think you can. I've said, I don't think you can give a materialist account of the supernatural.
Why should I believe in it if there's no reason to?
Well, hang on. It's not that there's no reason to.
If you don't have I'm going to nuance what I say. Then by definition, it is unreasonable.
I'm gonna nuance what I say. You can't give a materialist account of it, and we acknowledge that. Reason, though, is not bound to the material realm. Especially if you take more of like a dualistic. I mean, if you take the Descartesian view, he begins with the self, the thinking rational self, which is pre-material for Descartes. So reason is not just bound to empirical data. At least I don't know that it has to be. I think reason can be gathered from a mixture of life experience, a mixture of tradition, and hopefully divine revelation. I hope that's true. but that reason is not just bound to the material realm.
Why is reason not bound to the material realm?
My gut, and maybe this is wrong, but my gut says that it's because it doesn't actually work.
Reason doesn't work?
No. Binding it to the material realm doesn't actually give us truth. I mean, we can think in terms of, geometry. This is what early moderns were doing. They were doing math, and they were doing immaterial math, something that they believed was transcendent above matter itself. And we can sit here and say, but they were wrong. But I think there's something in the human that does lead us to consider things outside of just matter. When early moderns were thinking rationality, they weren't just thinking empiricism. They were thinking abstract geometry and creating truths that are transcendent in some way. And so I can't fully give an account of why it can't be bound to matter. But I could say that it doesn't appear to work. It doesn't appear to actually produce holistic understanding, like good, authentic understanding of the human life, or good understanding of the things that we ask, the questions that we ask. I mean, I feel like it just also minimizes things like love. It doesn't allow them a reality because it says that they're not materially viable, when we know that's not true, just from a common sort of ethos that we share as humans.
I disagree, but I feel like I agree. So in the sense of I love how you refer more to the classics, because it seemed like when philosophy started, correct me if I'm wrong, because you're a little bit more familiar with this topic than I am, I can tell, but the way that it started was trying to access wisdom, eudaimonia, as it were, the best life, virtue ethics, how to be a good person, how to make a positive influence in the community. And the Enlightenment just kind of shit on all that. It resulted in the Wealth of Nations, the Leviathan, Zarathustra, these very cold writings that just, it pulled us away from a lot of what really feels intrinsically human. And in that sense, I can totally see where you're coming from. I just, my heart's with you. My brain can't follow.
I totally understand. I really do.
Yeah. But either way, I really enjoyed this conversation. Tyler, this has been very refreshing to me. I can tell you, the listeners already love you. A couple of them are kind of like the grumpy listeners, and that's okay.
I know they're ripping me to shreds. I could have been clear.
That are like, this motherfucker, but the majority of the listeners, they appreciate somebody that can just have a positive conversation and present two different points of view.
Totally. Well, hey, let me say, I would love to continue this conversation. Love to be back on. I think this has been a hoot and a half. But I will also say that really one of my big thrusts in life is actually, I love metaphysics and I love philosophy, but culture and cultural Christianity and what the hell is going on in Christianity today is it's one of the things that I'm actually really, really focused on and love studying. So I would love to keep dialoguing in the future about things like that.
If anybody wanted to contact you and ask you a couple questions, what's a good resource for them?
Traylortyler, TraylorTyler @gmail.com.
If you're in the Denver area, Tyler would like you to swing by St. Patrick Presbyterian Church. And if you're in front of a computer, look up Aspen Grove Church Planting Network. Once again, all these links, including his email address, will be in today's show notes. Tyler, thank you so much for your time today, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you to Tyler. Thank you to Dave Blair. Thank you to our patrons. You can also support this broadcast at patreon.com/right and learn more at therighttoreason.com. Next week, I'll be talking to Dr. Janice Shelby about the psychology of religion. Between now and then, remember that you have the right to reason.
This is Seamus from the Free Thought Prophet, and you have the right to reason.
I'm Nikki from Unapologetics.
I'm Brent Lee from Unapologetics, and you have the right to reason.
This is Philip, and you have a right to reason.
Mary, keep on burning, yeah!
Rolling, rolling, rolling down the river.
This is
Freddy Squares, and I'm telling you that it's only logical that you have the right to reason.
Hello, this is Rob Montgomery, and you have the right to reason.
I'm rolling down the river of the right to reason. Ah, wait, that sounded stupid. It doesn't even make sense. This is Chris Christensen, and you have the right to not listen to this show because it's trash. That's what I think of you, Robert.
This is Sharon from Habeas Humor, and you have the right to reason.
Hey, this is Kevin, and you have the right to reason.
Hi, Cecilia, and you have the right to reason.
This is Sean Yankee, and you have the right to reason.
This is Chris Shelton, the critical thinker at large, and you have the right to reason.
This is Mark Warren, and you have the right to reason.
Hi, my name is Tyler Traylor. I am a hermeneutics scholar, and you have the right to reason.
Well, hello. This is Corey, and you have the right to reason.
This is Michael Moore, and you have the right to reason.
Still be rolling, 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 rolling on the river. Listen, I left a good job in the city, working for the man every night and day. But I never lost 1 minute of sleep, and I was worried about the way that things might have been. Big wheel keep on turning, proud Mary keep on burning, and we're rolling, 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 rolling down, rolling on a river, rolling on the river. Cleaned a lot of plates in Memphis, pumped a lot of tang down in New Orleans, but I never saw the good side of the city until I hitched a ride on the riverboat Queen. The wheel keep on turning, and the primary keep on burning. So we're rolling, rolling, yeah, rolling down, rolling on a river.